was a cold Monday evening, February 9th, 2004. Snow still blanketed much of New England, burying secrets in silence. And somewhere along Route 112 in Woodsville, New Hampshire, a black Saturn sedan sat wrecked against a snowbank, its front end slightly crumpled, its driver nowhere to be seen. That night, Maura Murray, a 21-year-old nursing student from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, vanished, and 2 decades later, she remains one of the most chilling, unsolved mysteries in American crime history. But Maura's story doesn't begin at that roadside. It begins in a far more unsettling place, a place of unease masked by everyday life. Maura Murray was the kind of girl who, at a glance, had it all together. She was bright, athletic, ambitious. Raised in Hanson, Massachusetts, by a working-class family, she was the 4th of 5 children. Her father, Fred Murray, was a fixture in her life, sometimes overbearing but deeply involved. Her mother, Lori, was divorced from Fred and battling cancer at the time. Maura herself was focused on her nursing studies at UMass, having transferred from West Point just 2 years earlier. She seemed composed, determined, driven. But behind the facade, something was unraveling. In the days leading up to her disappearance, Maura's life showed disturbing signs of fragmentation. Cracks that, in hindsight, feel like ominous whispers. On February 5th, just 4 days before she vanished, Maura was working the night shift at a security desk job in Melville Hall at UMass when something shook her to the core. Around 1 a.m., she received a phone call. No one knows who it was from. But after hanging up, she reportedly broke down into tears, sobbing uncontrollably for over 20 minutes. Her supervisor, confused and concerned, approached her. When asked what was wrong, Maura could only respond with a chilling phrase, "My sister." Later, it was revealed that nothing specific had happened to her sister. The source of Maura's breakdown remains a mystery. And that wasn't the only red flag. Just 2 days later, on February 7th, Maura and her father went car shopping. Her old Saturn was on its last legs, and Fred had agreed to help her find a new vehicle. That night, after dinner, she borrowed his brand-new Toyota Corolla to attend a party at her dorm. By 2:30 a.m., she crashed the car into a guardrail near the university. No alcohol was found in the car. No citations were issued. But Fred would later say that Maura seemed deeply shaken by the accident. She apologized profusely. She promised to file an insurance claim first thing Monday morning. But she never made that call. Instead, what followed was a string of strange behaviors, actions that, to this day, baffle both law enforcement and her family. On the morning of Monday, February 9th, Maura began to wipe her digital slate clean. She emailed her professors, telling them there had been a death in her family, a lie, and that she would be out for the week. She then called the owner of a condominium in Bartlett, New Hampshire, a town her family vacationed in before. She inquired about renting the unit. She then searched for directions to Burlington, Vermont. And MapQuest printouts of that route were later found in her car. At 3:15 p.m., she withdrew $280 from her bank account, nearly all the money she had. At 3:40 p.m., she went to a nearby liquor store and purchased about $40 worth of alcohol, including Bailey's Irish Cream, Kahlua, and a box of wine. She never told a soul where she was going. She didn't confide in her boyfriend, Billy Rausch, a U.S. Army lieutenant stationed in Oklahoma. She didn't tell her father. She didn't tell her best friends or her professors. At approximately 4:30 p.m., she left the UMass Amherst campus for the last time. Her destination was unclear, her purpose unknown. Her mind, perhaps, already lost to whatever storm had been quietly brewing. The road she took, Route 112, cut through the snowy silence of New Hampshire's North Country. Trees lined the route like silent sentries. Small towns blinked by in the rearview mirror. By 7:27 p.m., Maura was on the outskirts of Haverhill, a town that rarely made headlines, until that night. A resident living along the road, Faith Westman, called 911 at 7:27 p.m. to report an accident outside her house. She said a small black car had skidded off the road and crashed into a snowbank. The driver appeared uninjured but was behaving oddly, possibly intoxicated. A few minutes later, a school bus driver named Butch Atwood stopped at the scene and spoke with Maura. He later told police she insisted she didn't need help, that she had already called AAA. But records show no such call was ever made. Perhaps she was buying time. Perhaps she was afraid. By the time the police arrived at 7:46 p.m., just 19 minutes after the crash, Maura was gone. No footprints led away from the scene, no drag marks, no sign of a struggle. Her car doors were locked. Her airbags deployed. The windshield was cracked. Inside, her belongings were scattered. The alcohol, some of it missing, a damaged box of wine in the back seat, a book on mountain climbing, a stuffed animal, and her favorite necklace. Her cell phone was gone. Her wallet, too. But strangely, her school books were packed neatly in the back. It was as if she had left of her own will, yet vanished into thin air. From that moment on, Maura Murray was no longer a nursing student, no longer a daughter, no longer just a young woman on a snowy road. She became a question mark, a mystery buried beneath 20 inches of snow and years of speculation. What happened in those crucial minutes between 7:27 and 7:46 p.m.? Did she run from the scene and hitchhike with a stranger? Did she flee into the woods to escape something or someone? Was it suicide? Foul play? A pre-planned escape? No one knew. But theories multiplied like wildfire. Some believed she staged her own disappearance. Others claimed she was fleeing from some unknown danger in her life, an abusive relationship perhaps, or a secret pregnancy. Some speculated she died in the woods and her body was simply never found. Yet others insisted someone local may have taken her, that the darkness held more than trees and silence. Her father, Fred, never accepted the idea that she left voluntarily. He was adamant. Maura didn't run away. She was taken. He drove tirelessly across New England for months, handing out flyers, begging for clues. He criticized the initial investigation, accusing local authorities of mishandling the scene, delaying the search, and dismissing Maura's case as just another college girl who walked away. But Fred's determination came at a cost. His relentless search alienated some, fueled conspiracy theories, and brought national attention to what was once a quiet, contained mystery. Yet he never stopped looking. Even today his voice cracks when he speaks of her, his eyes carrying the weight of 20th years. Meanwhile, Billy Rausch, Maura's boyfriend, remained deeply involved in the early days of the search. But questions soon swirled around him, too. Emails from before her disappearance suggested their relationship was strained. Some accounts mention controlling behavior. Others hint at trust issues. But no definitive link to her disappearance was ever established. What everyone agreed on was one thing: Maura was in trouble. But no one knows just how deep it went. The night she vanished, temperatures plummeted into the teens. If she had wandered off on foot, hypothermia would have set in quickly. Yet no dogs tracked her scent. No blood was found, no body, nothing. Only silence. Only questions. And in that dark corner of New Hampshire, where the wind whispers through bare trees and the snow buries secrets, Maura Murray disappeared, and nothing has been the same since. The night after Maura Murray vanished, the town of Haverhill, New Hampshire, returned to its ordinary stillness. No one knew yet that history had shifted along that desolate stretch of Route 112. To the casual observer, it was just another minor accident in the dead of winter. But beneath that thin layer of indifference lay the grim beginnings of a haunting. The next morning, when Maura was officially reported missing, a small-scale search was launched. Local police combed the immediate area around the crash site. They used dogs, snowmobiles, and helicopters. They scoured the woods lining Route 112, looking for any trace of footprints or discarded clothing, anything to suggest which direction she might have gone. But there was nothing. Not a single thread to follow. The dogs, reportedly, picked up her scent for about 100 feet from the car, and then it vanished, abruptly, as if she had been plucked from the earth itself. The early hours of a missing persons case are the most critical, and in Maura's case, those hours slipped by quietly, almost complacently. The crash scene wasn't treated as a potential crime scene. There was no real evidence collection. No barricades, no crime tape, just a tow truck and a police officer logging details. Her vehicle was impounded, but no forensic examination of the car was immediately conducted. It would be days before the idea of foul play truly took root. And by then, whatever evidence might have been there, snowprints, tire tracks, possible DNA, had melted away with the rising sun and careless oversight. Even worse, Maura's phone records were not accessed promptly. Her bank activity wasn't deeply analyzed until days later. And her dorm room? It remained untouched for nearly a week. When investigators finally searched it, they found something chilling. On Maura's desk sat a neatly packed box. Inside were various personal items, her textbooks, toiletries, and school papers. It looked like she had cleaned up and packed with purpose. Next to the box was a printed email to her boyfriend, Billy Rausch. Its contents were never publicly disclosed in full, but according to reports, it suggested some form of emotional turmoil, a relationship under stress, a girl not entirely at ease. Police would later say this suggested she planned to leave, possibly to start over, but others disagreed. Her family believed she may have been running from something, but not permanently. She took none of the essentials you'd need to start a new life. No passport, no significant cash, no evidence of long-term plans. The idea of a carefully orchestrated disappearance just didn't fit. If she had wanted to vanish completely, why crash her car? Why abandon it so publicly? It didn't add up. Nothing about Maura's case did. Soon Fred Murray took matters into his own hands. He drove to Haverhill and began organizing his own search parties. He questioned locals. He handed out flyers with Maura's photo, her deep brown eyes and reserved smile peering out from every telephone pole. He camped out in the area, relentlessly demanding attention from law enforcement and the media, but his presence began to create tension. The local police, already defensive, saw him as a nuisance. Fred saw them as incompetent. The atmosphere around the investigation grew heavy, filled with suspicion, resentment, and rumor. As the weeks passed with no trace of Maura, theories began to multiply like storm clouds. Some believed she had suffered a mental break, that the pressure from school, her relationship, and her past mistakes had become too much. Just months before her disappearance, Maura had been involved in 2 unsettling incidents. One involved using stolen credit card numbers to order food, something oddly out of character for a West Point-trained, high-achieving student. Another was a minor car accident while driving her father's car. These weren't career-ending events, but to someone like Maura, who thrived on control and high expectations, they may have felt overwhelming. Still, no one could make sense of why she would go north. Why the White Mountains? Her family vacationed in that area in past years, yes. But in the middle of winter, alone, with limited supplies and no clear reason? Others latched onto a darker theory that she had arranged to meet someone. Perhaps not a stranger, but someone she trusted. A secret rendezvous gone wrong. Could a person she knew have followed her? Could they have met her along Route 112 under the guise of helping her? No signs of a struggle were found, but the timeline was so tight, less than 20 minutes between the crash and police arrival, that anything could have happened in the span of a single conversation. Then there was Butch Atwood, the bus driver who spoke to Maura moments before she vanished. He was the last known person to see her alive. He claimed she seemed shaken, but not injured. He also claimed she insisted she didn't need help. He went home, parked his bus, and called 911. But some questioned his account. Why didn't he insist she stay in his vehicle until help arrived? Why didn't he mention smelling alcohol if she had just purchased liquor earlier that day? And why didn't the dogs pick up her scent leading from the crash to his home just 100 yards away? Butch was later cleared by authorities. Still, his story remained a focal point of public skepticism. In a case with no hard facts, the smallest inconsistencies turned into rabbit holes. There were other theories, stranger ones. Some believed Maura may have fallen victim to a serial killer. Around that time, there had been reports of a man in the area luring women into his car. Others noted the proximity of Maura's crash to a known drug corridor, a route used by traffickers moving between Vermont and Massachusetts. Could she have been picked up by the wrong person at the wrong time? Yet there was no solid evidence for any of these claims. The entire investigation became a ghost hunt, driven not by facts, but by fragments. In 2006, 2 years after her disappearance, hopes surged when a man with a backhoe claimed to have discovered something unusual in a nearby concrete basement. The slab had been poured shortly after Maura went missing. The homeowner refused to allow police to dig. Years passed. Finally, in 2017, a search was authorized. The basement was excavated. Nothing was found. It was another dead end in a case already littered with them. And still, the mystery of Maura Murray deepened. Her cell phone records, finally examined, showed her last known call was to a voicemail system at 4:37 p.m. on the day she vanished. There were no outgoing calls after that, no texts. Her phone, like her, simply vanished into the cold. Her boyfriend, Billy, had reportedly received a series of distressing voicemails in the days following her disappearance. One message in particular haunted him. It was nothing but a series of sobbing sounds, no words, just crying. Phone records traced it back to a calling card registered to a Red Cross line in New Hampshire. Was it Maura or someone else playing a cruel game? The call was never traced to a specific person, another lead swallowed by the dark. Her family never stopped asking questions. Her sister Julie, herself a West Point graduate, made media appearances and pressed authorities for answers. They criticized the lack of federal involvement. They questioned why cell tower pings weren't used more effectively. They pleaded with the FBI, the state police, and the media to not let her become another cold case. But as time dragged on, interest began to wane. Stories faded. The public moved on. Then in 2011, a bizarre twist reignited attention. A man living in Vermont contacted Fred Murray and a private investigator. He claimed his brother had confessed to killing Maura. According to the story, Maura had been kidnapped, assaulted, and murdered, and her body dumped in a pond near the New Hampshire border. Police investigated, dive teams searched the pond. Nothing was found. The man recanted. Another false lead. It was like chasing shadows. In a case where every step forward ended in fog, it became clear that Maura's disappearance wasn't just a mystery. It was a maze, a silent war between truth and speculation. memory, and myth. In 2017, the New Hampshire Cold Case Unit officially took over the investigation. The Attorney General's office released a short statement acknowledging the complexity of the case and reaffirming their commitment to resolving it. But behind closed doors, frustration brewed. The trail was too cold, the file too thick with theories and dead ends. And still, Maura remained missing. No sightings, no body, no answers. Just snow and silence. Somewhere in the white stillness of that February night, something happened to Maura Murray. And 20 years later, the world is no closer to knowing what. By the third week after Maura Murray's disappearance, the media began to circle. What started as local news had transformed into a national curiosity, a young, intelligent woman vanishing without a trace in a sleepy New Hampshire town. The ingredients were intoxicating: a troubled college student, an isolated crash, strange behavior, conflicting stories, and a vast wilderness that seemed eager to swallow answers. But the attention didn't bring clarity. It brought confusion. With every article, every interview, and every online forum post, the line between fact and fiction blurred further. A digital wildfire of theories consumed the story, and Maura Murray's case became one of the first major missing persons cases to be dissected in real time by the internet. Web sleuths, Reddit, and Facebook groups erupted with amateur detectives, each convinced they held the key to unlocking the truth. Maps were dissected, phone records analyzed, timelines reconstructed. Every piece of available data was pulled apart and reassembled into hundreds of different versions of the same story. But despite the passion and scrutiny, one thing remained painfully consistent: no Maura. The landscape of the internet became littered with speculation. Was Maura secretly pregnant? Did she suffer from dissociation or fugue states? Had she met with foul play, or had she successfully escaped a life she no longer wanted? Among the loudest voices were those who believed Maura had voluntarily disappeared. They pointed to her packed dorm, the MapQuest directions, the call to a condo rental office. They said it was all too deliberate to be coincidence. But others pushed back with equal force. They pointed to the missing alcohol, the fact that her father said she was emotionally distressed, the inconsistency of the crash timeline, the lies to professors, the voicemail from a sobbing woman. They saw trauma, not strategy, panic, not planning. And then there were the people who believed the truth lay in the woods around Haverhill, and that someone, maybe a local, had taken Maura, buried her, and moved on, that she never left the White Mountains, that her final breath was drawn beneath the pines long before the first search helicopter took flight. That version, though the most terrifying, felt grounded, tangible. The other theories, they relied on Maura being a ghost, someone able to slip past security cameras, avoid paper trails, and stay silent for decades. Possible, yes. But plausible? In 2018, after years of petitions and public pressure, law enforcement finally admitted what many had long suspected. The case was cold. There were no suspects, no physical evidence, no leads, just questions aging in silence. The Murray family refused to let the momentum die. They hired private investigators, cadaver dogs, and ground-penetrating radar teams. One by one, they chased down leads, most of them ending in heartbreak. One tip took them to a nearby A-frame house, just a short drive from the crash site. The story went that a local man known for erratic behavior and violent tendencies had confessed, while intoxicated, to killing Maura. He said she had been buried beneath the floor of his old family home. The homeowner at the time allowed investigators to search. Dogs alerted in the basement. A cadaver scent, they said. Hope flickered for the first time in years. But law enforcement was slow to act. Fred Murray grew furious. Months passed before the basement was searched officially. When it was finally excavated, years after the initial tip, nothing was found. No remains, no blood, nothing. Another door slammed shut. By now, Maura's disappearance had become more than a case. It was a symbol, a cautionary tale about what happens when investigations go cold, when protocol is missed, when facts are allowed to rot in the fog of speculation. And it wasn't just the Murray family who paid the price. Billy Rausch, Maura's boyfriend at the time of her disappearance, found himself tangled in the web of suspicion. His phone records, from the day she vanished, were analyzed closely. Critics questioned the tone of his voicemails, his behavior during media interviews, and later accusations of misconduct in his personal life. Though never named as a suspect, public opinion began to fray around him. He maintained his innocence. He said he loved Maura, that he had no idea why she left or where she went, that he had been blindsided by her disappearance like everyone else. Still, the cloud hung over him, just as it did over nearly everyone connected to the case. Then came a chilling development, one that many hoped would finally crack the silence. In 2021, the New Hampshire State Police announced they had conducted an extensive ground search in the area around Loon Mountain, not far from Maura's last known location. They brought cadaver dogs, forensic specialists, and ground-penetrating radar, a concentrated effort, high visibility. But again, nothing. The woods kept their secret. And yet, even with no body, no weapon, no motive, Maura's case has endured in the public consciousness. People see themselves in her, a young woman with ambition, pressure, secrets, someone trying to keep it all together while it slowly fell apart. She wasn't a celebrity, she wasn't from a wealthy family, but her story became iconic because it felt so fragile, so terrifyingly possible, that anyone could vanish just like that, that the world could swallow someone whole without a sound. Theories continued to evolve. Some pointed to Route 112 itself, a long, winding road surrounded by nothing but darkness and woods, perfect for someone looking to disappear, or for someone looking to make someone else disappear. Truck drivers, hunters, drug couriers, a few passing headlights, a few closed curtains. All it would take is a single wrong encounter, a stranger offering a ride, a smile that led to violence. Others wondered if Maura had made it far past the crash site, if she'd trekked deep into the forest seeking refuge or escape, that she succumbed to the cold, buried under years of snow and decay. But then why didn't the dogs find her? Why didn't the scent trail go deeper? Why did it stop just 100 feet from the road? And what of the red truck? Multiple witnesses reported seeing a red pickup truck lingering near the crash scene that night. It was never identified. No license plate, no driver, just a vehicle that didn't belong. Anomalous, ominous. Was it a passing Samaritan or a predator waiting for opportunity? Police never located the vehicle. Another potential lead lost in the shuffle. At one point, a man who had lived in the area was arrested on unrelated charges. When searched, police discovered items in his home that seemed unusual. Women's clothing, restraints, newspaper clippings about Maura. He was questioned, released. No connection was ever officially made. More shadows, more dead ends. By now, the timeline had grown brittle. Most of the original investigators had retired. Witnesses had moved or passed away. Locations had been renovated or destroyed. The crash site itself had changed. Trees cut, roads widened, signs replaced. Yet Fred Murray still returned year after year, still stood in the snow along Route 112, staring into the woods, hoping for a sign, a bone, a thread, something, anything. He once said, "I'll bring her home or die trying." And in a case like this, you start to understand how haunting that promise is. Years passed, but the name Maura Murray remained etched in the cold bones of New England. In the small towns of New Hampshire, whispers of her name still ride the wind, carried through the birch trees and across the empty stretches of Route 112, as if the road itself remembers what happened, or at least what was lost. But the world moved on. In 2024, 2 full decades since Maura's disappearance, nothing definitive has been found. No body, no confession, no evidence. Only fading tire tracks, a smashed bottle of wine, and a silence that has outlived every theory ever proposed. The unsolved nature of the case has transformed it from a tragedy into folklore, repeated, examined, embellished, but never resolved. For her family, time hasn't dulled the ache. Fred Murray is now an old man. His voice, once booming with anger and urgency, is softer now, weathered by years of unanswered questions. Yet even in his quiet moments, the determination remains. Every interview he gives, every documentary he participates in, carries the same message. Maura didn't run away. Someone did this. And it's that conviction that continues to drive many of those still invested in the case. Over the years, countless documentaries, podcasts, and YouTube deep dives have analyzed every second of Maura's final day. Shows like Disappeared, The Missing, and The Disappearance of Maura Murray on Oxygen reintroduced her story to new audiences, each time rekindling public interest and scrutiny. But with every new theory, the waters grew murkier. Maura's life became fragmented, sliced into puzzle pieces by strangers. Internet sleuths dissected her character, motives, and past mistakes, often overlooking the simple truth. She was human. Not a riddle, not a myth. A daughter, a sister, a young woman who smiled in photos, ran cross-country, and once wrote hopeful letters home from West Point. Somewhere beneath the weight of assumptions and speculation, that version of Maura still existed. But public perception doesn't always allow room for nuance. The online world surrounding Maura's case became, in some ways, a second disappearance. The real Maura was buried beneath threads and timelines, YouTube thumbnails, and monetized content. Her story turned into a commodity, fuel for engagement, theories as entertainment. And in that transformation, something crucial was lost: the human grief. The intimate pain of a family destroyed not only by loss, but by the endless, gnawing absence of truth. Even now, as the New Hampshire Cold Case Unit occasionally revisits the file, no updates have emerged. The forensic evidence in her Saturn sedan, if any existed, has long degraded. Surveillance technology from 2004 was primitive compared to today. The cell phone pings? Vague and incomplete. Even the roads have changed, leaving behind only memories. But despite everything, the fascination with Maura endures. Maybe it's because her case sits at the crossroad of two great fears. The idea that someone can vanish without a trace, and the possibility that we may never know why. The psychological weight of this case doesn't just haunt her family. It resonates with anyone who's ever lost someone and not known where they went. With anyone who's ever seen their child walk out the front door and wondered if they'd come back. It's why people still travel to the crash site. Even now you can find flowers tucked into snowbanks on Route 112. Small laminated photos of Maura pinned to trees. Stones marked with messages. You're not forgotten. Still looking. Come home. One particularly eerie rumor persists about the crash site. That if you stand there late at night, just as the wind begins to pick up, you can hear footsteps in the woods. Some say they've seen a girl in a black coat moving between the trees. Of course, it's folklore. But in a story like this, where facts are scarce and imagination has room to stretch, even shadows grow meaning. Maura has become a symbol, a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying mysteries don't involve serial killers or criminal masterminds, but ordinary people. A young woman, a lonely road, a brief moment, and then nothing. Because that's the sharpest blade in this whole tragedy. The silence. It's not just the silence of a missing voice or a phone that never rang again. It's the silence of institutions that failed, of leads never followed, of evidence never collected, of systems built to find the missing, yet often too rigid or slow to act in time. If Maura had disappeared today, 20 years later, the investigation might have looked entirely different. With smartphones, GPS, doorbell cameras, and real-time surveillance, her trail might not have gone cold. A single Snapchat, a pinged location, a photo from a gas station might have changed everything. But in 2004, the digital net was looser, and she slipped through. Still, not everything has been forgotten. The Murray family remains vocal. In 2023, they organized a memorial walk on the exact stretch of road where Maura vanished. Dozens attended. Supporters, friends, strangers who felt the weight of her absence. Some had followed the case since the beginning. Others had only recently learned her name. All shared a single question. Where is Maura Murray? The Attorney General's office remains tight-lipped. While the case is technically open, there have been no recent public updates. Behind the scenes, investigators continue to receive tips. Some credible, most not. Over the years, psychics have offered visions. Convicts have offered false confessions. Locals have shared vague memories, each one a broken compass, spinning without direction. For those close to Maura, the emotional toll has been catastrophic. Her siblings, once hopeful, have grown cautious. Her father has aged decades in grief. Her mother, Lori, passed away in 2009, never knowing what happened to her daughter. And Maura herself has become frozen in time. Still 21. Still missing. Still dressed in her winter coat. Standing beside that black Saturn on a cold night. Maybe watching headlights approach. Maybe trusting someone she shouldn't have. Maybe trying to escape something no one else ever saw. There's a quote often used in missing persons cases. It reads, "Someone somewhere knows something." That idea remains the last ember of hope in Maura's story. That out there, somewhere, is a person who saw a vehicle, heard a scream, noticed a girl walking in the cold. Someone who holds the final piece. Maybe they've stayed silent out of fear or guilt or detachment. Maybe they think it's too late, but it's not. Because cases like Maura's don't expire. Not in the minds of those left behind, not in the archives of justice, and not in the collective conscience of a world that cannot allow a person to simply vanish. Every so often, a new clue emerges. A new theory catches fire online. A photograph surfaces. A tip is phoned in. And for a moment, hope flickers again. But each time, the cycle ends the same way. With silence. The kind of silence that doesn't echo, but absorbs. And so we're left with this. A missing girl, a shattered family, and a road that remembers more than it says. A case that continues to haunt. Not because it's so unusual, but because it's not. Because if Maura Murray can vanish, anyone can. Maybe that's why we keep telling her story and why it sticks. Why, after all these years, her name still cuts through the noise. Because her story isn't just about a disappearance. It's about the fragile thread we all walk on, how easily it can snap, how quickly we can be forgotten, unless we keep remembering, unless we refuse to let go. And so Maura's face remains on missing posters. Her name remains on forums. Her family continues to light candles. Her father still drives that lonely road. And somewhere someone knows the truth. But until they speak, we'll keep walking with ghosts, listening for echoes in the cold, and staring down a stretch of road where one girl, just one, vanished forever. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share